All right, hello, and thank you all for being here. And welcome to Showtime Toastmasters Power Hour workshop for June 2022. Our presenter tonight is Bobby O'Connell. She is a retired business analyst who has been studying the business of public speaking for over 2 decades. She has served as a District 3 Speakers Bureau Chair, Spring Conference Chair, and in many other leadership roles. Bobby has also worked with numerous entrepreneurs to develop startup business plans and to acquire initial financing. In tonight's presentation, she will share nuggets of information that she's gathered in her years of research that can help you to get the gig outside of your Toastmasters club. I'm going to ask everyone to make sure that they're on mute, and join me in welcoming distinguished Toastmaster Bobby O'Connell as she presents Getting the Gig, Tips from the Pros.
Thank you so much, Marilyn, and good evening, everyone. I'm so happy to be here tonight because the business of public speaking has been a passion of mine. I've been sharing information for close to 2 decades. So I'm excited tonight to share with you some information that I think you can immediately put to use in your journey on the path towards professional speaking. So I'd like to start tonight with a quick poll. I'm going to launch it. Can everyone see the poll? So the question is, have you already had speaking engagements outside of Toastmasters or your job? If you'd take a minute to choose a response. And then I also invite you to type into the chat because I'd like to know what it is you would like to learn about tonight. What specifically, what can we help you to get through tonight? Okay, has everyone voted? If so, I think I will go ahead and end the poll. And I'll share the results. So we do have just a bit of a mix. And most of us, I think, are, on the moving forward on the path to professional speaking. And many of us have already spoken for free. So maybe it's time to get something in exchange for our presentations. So before we get into the weeds tonight, I'd like to do a quick level set. So I'm assuming that you or any of us as a professional speaker, that we have certain things in place already. So for example, you've got expertise and you've got, a unique perspective on whatever your expertise is about. You've got 2 or 3 really great presentations and you've got the skills to deliver those presentations well. You've got content that has value. People are willing to pay for what you offer. You've got a clearly defined market niche. You've got an attractive website. You've got a social media presence. And you've got some other marketing tools. So for example, you probably have a one sheet and you have maybe your sizzle reel, your video demo. You've got, high quality photos. You've got testimonials, and maybe you even have a book or 2. And all of these things, yes, indeed, they will greatly impact your ability to get hired as a professional speaker. But those are all subjects for other workshops, because tonight we're going to focus on a little different angle. We're going to talk about finding speaking opportunities, number 1. We'll talk about developing a presenter proposal. And then we're going to talk about strategies for, setting your fees for speeches. And finally, we'll talk about the checklists for speaking engagements that you can use as a professional speaker. But over all of those things, one important takeaway tonight is that it's so important that you be professional. If you want to be a professional speaker, you must act like a professional speaker. And you can have the best speech in the world, you can deliver it with enthusiasm and energy. But if you're hard to work with, people will not hire you back. You won't get that next gig. So let's get into it now. And the first question is, Where can you find those speaking opportunities outside of your Toastmasters club? For me personally, my first experience was being a TLI facilitator. In other words, the Toastmasters Leadership Institute, which is club officer training. And yeah, you don't get paid for TLI, but it's a wonderful training ground because you get to see behind the scenes what goes into putting on a training event for hundreds of participants. Another step that you can take immediately is to sign up for the District 3 Speakers Bureau. I see at least one or two of you here tonight that are members of the Bureau already. And yes, Speakers Bureau members are not paid. They offer free speeches as a service to the community, but it's a great way to get experience. It's a great way to get exposure beyond Toastmasters and beyond your job. So most of the time, though, you won't be paid a fee, but that said, during my 6+ years as chair of the District 3 Speakers Bureau, there were several occasions when people did get paid for speeches. So for example, Don Griffith, I think he was paid around $500 when he did a presentation for a Six Sigma quality group. Another example is Michael Desiderio. He did a keynote presentation at a national conference for the blind that was here in Phoenix for some years ago. I think he got $4,000 for that gig, which came to us through the Speakers Bureau. And a third example is Jody K. Petra. She was a trainer and she was engaged through the Speakers Bureau to do a training session for a local corporation. And they liked her so much, they asked her if she'd come back and do some more training. And that gave her an opportunity then to negotiate to get paid for her services. Tony Valles is a member of Showtime, and he just did a paid or a speaking gig on March 30th for a group called OPAL, which is the Oracle Professional Asian Leadership Group. And that engagement came through the Speakers Bureau. So for myself personally, because of that membership, I've spoken to civic groups like in women's groups like American Business Women's Association, Seroptimus International. I did an Elks Club. There was a training session for some Boy Scout leaders. And one of my personal favorite experiences from the Speakers Bureau was working with the Milwaukee Brewers baseball, their farm team in Maryvale, because they brought us in several years in a row to help their newest players learn how to speak to the media. So that was really fun and exciting. There were other presenters that spoke at senior centers, and one guy did a Veterans Day presentation at a very large apartment complex that sponsored events every so often. It was also my first chance to speak at a conference. In 2 occasions, I spoke before the National Educational Professionals Association or something like that. They had a conference here in Phoenix, and it was very, very exciting for me at the time. So if you would, take a moment and please type into the chat some organizations that you know of that have speakers, let's say, at their regular monthly meetings. A lot of groups have, a chapter meeting and they have a little program during the meeting. So can you think of some of those groups? So Lauren says she's been a member of the Speakers Bureau. And Katrina says, where do you start? And Katrina, did you mean where do you start with the Speakers Bureau or where do you start with the number of organizations? Okay, number of organizations. Okay, so remember too, if you have a question or a comment, you can go ahead and click the raise hand button by choosing reactions, or some people have an ellipsis button on their phone, I think. So anyway, Toastmasters does have even more opportunities for you to speak outside your club. So for example, you could do a youth leadership program or a speechcraft event, especially if you're interested in becoming a facilitator or a trainer of some sort. District 3 also has that monthly Lunch and Learn series that they do every month. And don't forget the impact event that Lauren just spoke at that recently. It's a career and professional development event at least once a year. And then remember too that spring conference, the educational sessions need presenters. You may even want to choose to submit a presenter proposal for the Toastmasters International Convention that's held each year in August. Now, I'm sure they already have all their 2020 speakers already booked, but maybe now's the time for you to start thinking about what you could present next year in August of 2023. So Marilyn, would you please go ahead and post handout number 1 into the chat? And this is a list of resources that you can explore to find speaking opportunities. And there are so many ways, even outside of Toastmasters, that you can find speaking gigs. So the first one I'll mention is, the event websites, sites like meetup.com or eventbrite.com. And then there are all the organizational websites. Just go online and do a search for the civic groups, service groups, women's groups, youth groups, church groups, and especially professional associations, the ones that your topic would be of interest to a particular professional association. You might also submit a proposal to speak at a TEDx event or Ignite Phoenix. Ignite Phoenix happens a couple times a year. And now these events that were canceled during COVID, but they're starting to come back now. There'll be some planning stuff coming out soon, and this is the time to be watching for those opportunities. One of the best places to get paid speaking gigs is at colleges and universities. So I recommend that you go online and check their events calendar, because they almost always include the name, phone, and email address for whoever's responsible for that event. The other big place where bread and butter is made for professional speakers is government agencies and large corporations. So reach out to them, reach out maybe to their training department or to a wellness program. So for example, at Maricopa County, they always brought in, speakers to do these 8-week series. Like one of them was on weight loss, and there was one that was done on smoking cessation. So there's a number of opportunities for corporations and government agencies. And then on LinkedIn, be sure that you've listed professional speaking or public speaking as one of your skills. And then reach out to people and ask them to give you an endorsement or a recommendation. It's really valuable. And in my years of research here, I've also learned that they're what they call marketplace websites, where they match, meeting planners or meeting organizers can find speakers. So for example, there's one called We Speak Global, eSpeakers, Speaker Hub, and there's one called freespeakers.org. And all of these, you can usually post a listing as a speaker at no charge. But if you want to appear higher on the search results, then you may want to consider actually paying for the membership. Some of them are pretty reasonable. I think one of them was like $35 a year. So that's doable. And then of course, Google searches. This is where the magic happens, right? This is where you can find these speaking opportunities. So for example, this past week, I typed in Arizona Leadership Conference just to see what would come up. And one of the things that came up was an Eventbrite listing for a group called Ascension Mastermind Group Leadership and Personal Development Seminar. It's happening next month. It's in Scottsdale. So then I tried Arizona Diversity Council, because diversity is a huge topic for public speakers at this point in time. So when I typed in Arizona Diversity Conference, what came up was Arizona Diversity Council. So I went to their website and there were tons of events listed. And I imagine many, many of those events will require speakers. Then I also tried adding the year. So Arizona Diversity Conference 2023. And a couple of things popped up. In April of 2023, they're having a National Diversity and Leadership Conference. And then in January next year, the Arizona Department of Education is having an ESSA conference. I'm not quite sure what that is, but that's happening in January. All of these are speaking opportunities. So are there any questions or comments? I can't, Marilyn, do you want, okay, I see we've got some, the ASQ, who was it that put this one in? Jimmy Dent. Jimmy, do you want to tell us about that one? It said monthly speakers.
Yeah, the ASQ, a lot of the topics are about quality, but they don't have to be. I've heard a lot of speakers come in and talk about their services or their other business.
Okay.
You know, so ASQ is always looking for a monthly speaker. There's a Phoenix section, there's a Tucson section, there's a section up here in Colorado Springs.
Okay, great. That's a great lead.
Sections are always looking. A lot of times they're looking at several months in advance. The same thing with SME, Society of Manufacturing Engineers. It's basically the same thing. It doesn't have to be about manufacturing.
And that's so true, because a lot of these local chapters, when they have their meetings, they're trying to provide their members with, you know, something different, maybe inspiration or something about leadership, even if it doesn't have to do with the particular field, you know, the area of expertise for that organization. So I do have some tips for you when you reach out to these organizations. And again, just as Jimmy said, a lot of these meeting planners and meeting organizers, they're working months in advance. So if it's too late for you to be a speaker at the current year event or the next upcoming event, ask about the one after that. Ask about the one for next year, and then just follow up as time goes on. And then you always want to try and contact the person who's actually responsible for booking the speakers. So that might be the program chair for these organizations, or it might be an event planner. It might be the meeting organizer. Just try and find out who that is. You won't always be successful at that, but just try and find out. Now, I did find an interesting tip from one professional speaker named Orly Amore, and she recommends that when you're on LinkedIn, not to contact meeting planners through LinkedIn. She says they'll blacklist you. Now, I'm not sure if that's true, but it's what she said. And another tip that she had for speakers was to not use the NSA or the Toastmasters logo when you're pitching yourself. And she said the reason for that is because you'll be viewed as a wannabe professional speaker rather than someone, you know, someone who's still learning about being a pro. And then I also recommend that when you contact someone about their event, if someone suggested that you reach out, drop that person's name, because if there's that connection, it might be the in that you need. And then always mention the specific event, you know, XYZ conference that you've got coming up, whatever it might be. There's a guy named Benji Bruce, and he's got a website called Speaking Lifestyle. And his suggestion is to just be confident. Always assume that whoever you're reaching out to, they're going to want you to be a speaker. And that may turn out to be the case. But then be prepared also to talk about your value proposition. So what is it of value that you will bring to this organization? What kind of problem will you help them to solve? What can you do for the attendees at the event? Another professional speaker named Patrick Snow, he has a little different approach. Whenever he finds out about a speaking lead, you know, gets contact information, he'll send them a signed copy of his hardcover book. And he does that for two reasons, really. The first one is because it helps establish his expertise. He's got a book, so he must be an expert, right? And the second reason is because sometimes the meeting planner or meeting organizer will buy multiple copies of his book that'll be distributed to participants during the event. That doesn't hurt. And no matter what, when you're talking with these meeting organizers and planners, be sure that if you promise anything, always, always follow up. Be on time, be prompt. That's part of being professional. Benji Bruce also says that you've got to be persistent. He thinks that you'll probably make 100 contacts before you find that first paid speaking gig. But then as you get better at it, as you have experience, as you've done presentations, little by little, you'll start getting more and more referrals, which that'll be your bread and butter. You know, Patrick Snow also, he provided in one webinar that I saw, he provided 5 tips or tips, secrets of success for speakers. The first 2 had to do with sending out the book and then following up, but tips 3, 4, and 5 were exactly the same. He says, follow up. The fortune is made in the follow-up. And if you think about it, how many of you have heard that old axiom that it takes, up to 7 contacts before you'll actually make a sale? So the message is be persistent, follow up. And by the way, one of the best resources that I've provided on the handout today is there's a link on the back page under speaking lifestyle. It's a link to a Google Docs ebook by Benji Bruce. And in this book, he goes step by step through his personal process for finding opportunities to speak. And I think it's brilliant. He tells you what to say, and he explains, how it's important that you try and come across like you're always busy. And it's just really interesting reading. I think it'll be well worth your time. Then again, just remember that it takes months of follow-up a lot of times before you get that gig that you want. Meeting planners, they're booking their speakers well in advance of advertising the event. So you just have to follow up. Okay, let's pause for a minute. Marilyn, is there anything coming through the chat or are there questions?
No, we had some other suggestions about places that you could get, or at least you could check for speaking gigs. Let's see here. I'm having to scroll back up, sorry. Let's see here. Cynthia gave us the National Sales Associates organization. There's the Phoenix Heart Association, my bad. And Katrina also had contributed that a lot of community centers like to have speakers come in and speak on different topics. So,
yes, those are all great tips. And then here are a few more ideas for you that can lead to speaking opportunities. So the first one is to find ways to be interviewed. There are lots of podcasters and YouTubers and video bloggers out there who are looking for guests for their programs, and maybe even a radio or TV. And this does 2 things. Not only does it build your credibility, but it gets you exposure to a wider audience outside of Toastmasters, outside of your work. And if you have a book, go to the library and check with bookstores. Changing Hands in Tempe, for example, brings in speakers who, authors, and have them talk about their book. And then, of course, do a book signing and sell more copies of their book. I also recommend that you partner with other speakers. And in particular, I suggest that you partner with speakers who have a similar audience, but their topic doesn't compete with yours. So for example, let's say I'm a speaker and I have a friend who's a speaker, and our audience is usually women, let's say. But maybe I speak about, financial investment opportunities or something like that. And maybe the other speaker talks about dressing for success. So you see how those are non-competing market niche areas, but they have that same similar audience. And it helps both of us to get more exposure. And then if I'm not available on a certain day for, a gig that might come my way, I can recommend my friend, and then she can recommend me as well. Another opportunity is to participate in like a Facebook webinar, or what they call like a summit webinar event. So for example, last October, I attended a 3-day online summit event called Monetize Your Message. And it was all for professional speakers, people who want to make more in their speaking career. And the way it worked was they had about 20 some speakers, and each speaker marketed the event to their social media base, whatever marketing channels they had. Then each speaker did a presentation at the summit. But what that did was it got each of those 20 plus speakers more exposure to audiences they hadn't seen before. And if you'd like to be a paid webinar speaker or facilitator, then you might consider contacting a company like SkillPath or Fred Pryor Seminars, because they hire independent contractors around the world, really, to do half or full day training sessions. Could be a great opportunity, way to make money. Another suggestion is to get to know event planners. And you can do that by subscribing to their trade magazines or even attending their conferences. Now, why would you want to do that? Since you're a speaker and they're a meeting planner, it's because getting a speaking gig is about who you know and who knows you. You have to think like that meeting planner will think. So for example, I'm a meeting planner. I've got an event coming up. I know what the theme is. I need a speaker. So first I think, who do I know that would be the right fit for this particular event? And if I can't come up with someone, then I'll probably next go and ask my boss or maybe a corporate executive or my fellow meeting planners and meeting organizers. I might ask them, who do you know that would be right to speak, give a keynote at this particular event? And if I still can't come up with somebody, it's at that point that I finally will go to the internet and actually do a search and try and find someone. So again, now the number one tip that I think I've gotten from so many professional speakers is to ask for referrals. At the end of every event, make sure you ask for referrals. And one speaker, a pro speaker named Mike Domertz, he offers a little freebie to the attendees if they go out and fill out an online evaluation of his presentation. I think he gives them a little ebook or something like that. And in this evaluation, the last question is, who do you know that would benefit from this presentation? And then he asks for the contact information, the name, the organization, the phone, the email. And again, he sends out the little freebie, whatever it might be. One speaker named Clinton Young had a completely different approach that I hadn't heard of before. He's a professional keynote speaker, and he actually does a request for referrals during his keynote. And here's how he does it. He thinks it's a rather elegant way to ask for referrals. So he's about 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through his presentation, and he tells a story, and the point of the story is to be confident when you're going for your dreams, right? And he ends with a quote by W. Clemens Stone. Let me just read this. He says, "Tell everyone what it is that you want, and eventually someone will show up that wants to help you achieve it." And then Clinton goes on and he says, a lot of people think that a keynote speaker like me is a gazillionaire and I have hundreds of gigs lined up on my calendar for years. Well, that's just not the case. He said, the fact is 99% of the speaking engagements that come to me are through referrals. So if I've touched you in some way, if I've inspired you, if I've moved you to take action, and if you think that your organization would be benefited by this presentation, if I could make a difference for your group, I would be honored and thrilled to earn your referral. And then Clinton goes on and finishes the rest of his presentation. So I don't know, do you think that's elegant? Probably, it seems to work for him. People come up afterwards and suggest things. So that, again, after you speak, always ask the meeting organizer for referrals, recommendations, LinkedIn, whatever it might be. So as we wrap up this topic, there's a couple of things I just want to make sure you're clear about. So getting paid to speak is about who knows you and who you know. And if you're just starting out, you are the one who has to go out there and find and create these speaking opportunities for yourself. But once you're getting some experiences under your belt, that's when these referrals will start coming in. So keep that in mind. And if you'd like to learn more about how to get referrals, I recommend the book that's listed on the bottom of page 2 of the resources handout. It's called The Highly Referable Speaker. It's written by Michael Port and Andrew Davis. And for me, this was a real eye-opener. They'll give you some ways to think about building your business in a way you never thought of before. So I do have a challenge for you. Before you go to bed tonight, I invite you to go out online and find 10 organizations that might want you to be a speaker. 10 organizations. And tomorrow, I want you to send each of those organizations an email. by the end of the day tomorrow. So find 10 organizations and send them an email tomorrow. Now, it doesn't really matter whose email you find, because you just want to keep it short and sweet, real simple. Just say, hi, who's responsible for bringing in or hiring speakers for your XYZ event? And just say thank you and sign off. And then you can follow up again, or you might hear back from someone right away. So can you do that? And another comment about this, don't self-screen organizations. Don't, as you're looking for organizations who might want you, don't think, oh, they wouldn't want me, it's not a good match. So for example, if I do presentations about financial investments or something, and there's a nonprofit group that's looking for a speaker, don't just assume that they wouldn't want you, because you never know. Never, ever underestimate the power of serendipity and the law of attraction. You never know what will come in if you do. So will you accept this challenge? I really hope you do. So moving on, is there, Marilyn, do we need to check in?
Cynthia has a question for you.
Okay.
Cynthia, how about you ask that one? I'm sure she's here someplace.
Thank you, Marilyn. I'll be happy to. Toastmasters, we're really good at asking for an evaluation or having feedback. Is it okay to bring your own evaluation form, or ask the event planner to prepare an evaluation form so you can get feedback? What's the best approach?
So for me personally, that's one of the questions that I ask about when I'm first, making arrangements to speak somewhere. I find out, do they already have some kind of a standard evaluation form that they use? If they do, I ask if I'll be able to see the results for my session. And if they don't, that's when I would ask them if I could bring or have available online an evaluation form that will allow me to collect the information that I'm interested in. So does that answer your question, Cynthia? Okay. Well, thank you. And anything else, Marilyn?
No, I do want to make sure that everyone was able to see the resources handout that I put in the chat. Jared, did you finally find it?
No, I did not.
Okay, so let me just make a quick comment. These resources are actually already posted on Showtime's website under public downloads. So if you don't get them tonight, you'll be able to go and find them, later on. Okay. So anything else then?
Nothing. We've had some supporting comments to your audience from other people, but nothing directly at you. So I think we're doing really well, Bobby.
Okay, good enough. Thank you. So let's go ahead and move on to the next topic here, because for many events like TEDx events or conferences that have breakout sessions, you'll almost always be asked to complete a presenter proposal. And these, Marilyn, if you would post handout number 2, which is Showtime Toastmasters presenter proposal. And that's for people like me who want to speak at a Showtime workshop event. So what you'll notice on this handout is that the first page is all about it's information. It tells you the difference between a Power Hour workshop and a Fifth Monday workshop. We list the expectations that we have as a speaker. And then on pages 2 and 3, that's when you're asked to provide the meat. The title of your session, what's the goal of your session, and give a description. And very important, give the WIFM, why would people want to sign up for your session? And then we also ask you to provide references and a list of your speaking experiences, so as a way to vet you as a speaker. So I do have some recommendations for you about completing a presenter proposal. So the first thing is be sure you read that information that's provided by the sponsoring organization, because there'll be important things you need to know. Maybe it's instructions on how to submit the proposal, when, where, all those things. And if you're speaking at a conference or some other event that has a theme, be sure to ask or figure out a way to make your proposal fit in with the theme of the event overall. And then, of course, you'll want to have an intriguing title, something that will draw people in, make them want to come to your session. And if that's something you struggle with, we could actually probably do another whole workshop just on that topic. But you could also go into Google and just type in intriguing speech titles and see the articles that come up and read to learn a little more about how to craft a catchy title. And then, of course, you always, always, always want to address the WIFM in your session description. The what's in it for me? Why would people want to come to your event? When you submit your proposal, make sure you've tailored your biographical information to suit that event. Like, don't just list a bunch of credentials that have nothing to do with the topic or your why you would be the best speaker for that topic. Keep it focused and do the same thing when you're preparing the actual written introduction that you'll give to whoever's introducing you at the actual event. And then the big part of being professional is to proofread before you hit the submit button. Because what kind of an impression will you make if your proposal has typos or there are omissions or you didn't follow the instructions, whatever it might be? Make sure you look like a professional when you submit your proposal. And then finally, I recommend that you have 2 or 3 proposals all ready to go before you need them. Pick your top 2 or 3 topics, work up a presenter proposal so that you have the information handy when it comes time to actually need it. You don't have to scramble around. Okay, so I think we're ready to move on again. Unless, did anyone have anything they wanted to share or add? Presenter proposal guidelines. I see a question from Katrina. So Katrina, I recommend that you look at Showtime's presenter proposal form because we do give some guidelines in the sense of the expectations that we have as a speaker. A lot of times, you know, the organization will ask for your photo, or they may ask you to sign some kind of a waiver and that kind of thing. So you'll need to be aware of what it is they're going to be looking for. And, you know, I'm not sure, did you have something else specifically in mind when you talk about guidelines?
No, I was just wondering if what you were just going on, if you had put it into the chat so we could download it.
Oh, I thought, Marilyn, did you post that? Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Did you make it?
Okay. I've got people shaking their heads and I'm looking at it in the chat. So I don't know.
Everyone?
It's posted as Showtime online.
Yeah, it's not from me, but it's the documents that are posted in chat.
Right.
Well, again, if you can't get the document tonight, then, you know, we'll get you the link for Showtime's website and you can find it under public downloads.
Okay. I don't know how big your chat windows are, but it's the 1, 2, 3rd last post.
And they're all labeled Get the Gig handout, but it's number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. So they have the same title, but they have different numbers. So there is that as well. And Bobby, Connie has her hand raised.
Okay, so Connie, go ahead and unmute.
Yes, I'd like to ask about the photos. Is there a standard photo requirement in like what format?
That is usually something that the organization will let you know. Like, for example, most of them will say they prefer a JPEG photo. They may tell you the dimensions that they want. And then, of course, when you're doing a photo, you want to make sure that it looks professional, like have a nice background and stuff, that you look good. One speaker I know makes sure to have, when he gets a professional done photo, he'll have himself facing this way, and then he'll get another version where he faces the other way, and he'll send both photos, because then whoever's making the promotional materials can position so his face is pointing the way that would be best for that particular flyer or marketing material, whatever it might be. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Thank you, Connie. Anything else then about presenter proposals? All right. Well, then I'll go ahead and move on to our next topic, which is speaker fees. So how much does a professional speaker charge? And the short answer is it depends. I know you're shocked to hear that, right? But if you're a first-time speaker somewhere, chances are you'll make less than $500. You already have a full-time job, and the gig that you get will be something small, maybe a lunch and learn at a corporation, something like that. And when you're first entering the true realm of full-time public speaking, your first keynote gig, you'll probably get $500 to $2,500. When you're sort of at the novice level, by then you're probably, you might have a book and you're, starting to establish your brand a little bit, then you'll be making, $5,000 to $10,000. And as you become more experienced, then probably $10,000 to $20,000. And from $20,000 to $35,000, now we're talking someone who's pretty well known in their field, or maybe they're a best-selling author. They might even have multiple books. And then, of course, when we get to the $50,000, $100,000, $1 million range, now you're talking celebrities. We're talking ex-presidents like Clinton or Obama or Trump. We're talking superstar athletes like Michael Jordan. And it's funny, when I was searching, Michael B. Jordan, the actor, came up, and he actually makes $50,000 to $100,000 per keynote himself. The highest paid person that I found was Oprah. She makes between $1.5 million and $2.5 million for a keynote presentation. But if you think about it, it makes sense. This woman is a billionaire. What is the value of her time? How much does she make in a day? Probably $2.5 million is kind of a steal. So according to the highly referable speaker book that is on your resource list, your value as a speaker, a paid professional speaker, comes down to really 3 factors. And the first one is your fame. So of course, none of us here really are celebrities, but that doesn't mean we can't become a well-known expert in our market niche. So think of someone like Marie Kondo. She's that Japanese professional organizer, and she's been on TV, she's written books, she does speeches. She's got this market niche, and she's very well known. Another example is Mignon Fogarty. She appeared on Oprah. She's known as Grammar Girl. She has a weekly blog post, and she does all kinds of things. She's an author. And believe it or not, I actually met Mignon when both of us were presenting at that National Education Professionals Conference. So that is pretty cool. And she's an example to me. She's like a role model that it can be done. The second factor in determining your value, how much you will get paid as a professional speaker, is what they call in the book entertainment. How entertaining are you as a speaker? Do you have, something really unique and clever? But it's more than just that, because, a beginning speaker like me, let's say, we tend to provide information. But if you think about the truly great speakers, I'm talking someone like Tony Robbins. He gives people a transformational experience. And a business that hires Tony Robbins knows that he will help them solve whatever problem it is that they have. So entertaining, meaning what problem do you solve and how well do you do it? Do you change people's lives? That's what'll get you the big bucks. And finally, the third factor that will determine your value as a paid professional speaker is your expertise. And there's a huge difference between being a subject matter expert and being a truly visionary thought leader in your area. So Malcolm Gladwell is someone who comes to mind as a true visionary thought leader. And he gives us a new way to think in his books, like The Tipping Point or Blink or Outliers. So this all makes sense, I think, right? So the three factors then that will determine how much you get paid as a speaker, because the value that you bring are determined by your fame, the entertainment value, the problems that you can solve, the transformational experiences, and finally your expertise. So those three things will make a big difference. But now let's talk about some strategies for negotiating your speaking fees. And the first thing that everyone recommends is to ask what the speaker budget is for the event. And you want to do that because you need to know right off the bat, are they looking for a pro bono speaker, or will you actually have an opportunity to be paid? And once you know their budget, then you can also assess what you have in your list of products or things that you can provide, what would fit within their speaker budget. And of course, then you'll also want to ask questions about the event and the attendees at the event, because that helps you to understand what the needs of that planner or the corporation or whoever the organizer, the sponsoring organization is, because then you'll be able to offer sort of a range of services. And maybe, for example, is this just a keynote, a single keynote, or is it a keynote plus you'll be expected to do a breakout session? Or will they buy copies of your book? Will you have the opportunity to sell your book in the back of the room? Do they need any follow-up consulting services? All of these things will make a difference, and you can usually offer an array of options to that planner or organizer. And for training programs, here's another thing you might consider. You could give your client the option between paying a flat fee for the training or a per participant fee for the training. So maybe the organizer has a feel one way or another which would be more cost beneficial from their perspective. And one really important strategy is that you should make the first offer. And why would you want to do that? It's because there's a psychological advantage. So here's the thing, when you make that first offer, give them your high price, because you never know, they might say, great, we'll take it. And who's going to say no to that, right? But if they say, oh, gee, we don't have that much in our budget, then you can find out what their budget is, and then decide if you want to try and figure out how you can work within their budget. And if you do agree to speak for them and you've come down from your high fee, they're going to feel great because they'll feel like they got a bargain. You usually charge $10,000, but you're only charging them $5,000. So that's a psychological advantage. If you let them make the first offer and it's too low for you, you just can't accept it, then they're not going to have that really good feeling, because now they've got to negotiate and they're paying more than they wanted to pay. So keep that in mind. Make that first offer, make it high. And I think one tip that virtually every professional speaker would give you is to never, ever speak for free. Now, however, that doesn't mean that it will be in cash money, because you can consider, non-monetary compensation, or what they might call in kind, sort of a trade value of compensation. And for example, the honorarium, getting that free meal, or my goodness, I've gotten so many free gift cards for, 10 to 50 bucks, all of those things have value. And you might ask them about doing back of room sales, or ask them to provide a master copy of the digital recording for your presentation. That has value because you can now use that for marketing materials. Ask them to give you a list of all the attendee names and email addresses so that you can reach out to them and give them the option to sign up for your monthly newsletter or whatever you might use as marketing. Ask them to provide that LinkedIn testimonial within a week of the event. Or just flat out ask them for 3 referrals, let's say, or recommendations, whatever it might be. You might even ask them to put a link to your speaker website on their website, because that gets you exposure. Another thing you can do is offer to write some articles that they could publish in their upcoming newsletters, maybe for a series of months or quarters, whatever it might be. Again, it's all about exposure. You might ask someone, an organization to make a donation to your preferred charity. And I think that's what Tony Vias did when he spoke for that Opal group in March. I believe they gave a donation to his preferred charity in his name. So that's a form of compensation. And then one that I really like is maybe you'll agree to speak for no fee if the organization pays for your travel to a desirable locale. Maybe it's Hawaii or Europe. I don't think I would say no. I'd be on that plane. And then, just think about whatever else might have value for you. But just keep in mind, you should never, ever speak without getting something in return. And professional speaker Dottie Walters, she's written a number of books. And in her books, she says that it'll take you probably 300 free speaking engagements before you get that first paid gig. And I somewhat disagree with that perspective because I believe you can get an honorarium next month if you reach out and find that organization that's looking for a presenter at their meeting. The free meal, whatever it might be, all of these things will add up, and it's all about that exposure. So how are we doing here? We're getting close on time. Let me go ahead and move right into the speaking engagement planning checklist. And Marilyn, can you please post handouts number 3 and 4 into the chat? And again, if you can't get them tonight, they're already on Showtime's website. So the first one is the speaking engagement planning checklist. And this is when you're talking with someone about a potential gig. You want the who, what, when, where details about that engagement. You want to know what you're expected to provide. Is it a keynote? Is it 60 minutes? Is it 20 minutes? Whatever it is. You need to understand the client's expectations and what their needs are. What problem do they want you to solve? You'll want demographic information about your audience, just like in Toastmasters. Know your audience so that you can sort of tailor your presentation for that group. You also need information about the venue. What will the setup be? And is there technology and equipment or a person to support you during the event? And then finally, if you've got a paid engagement, you'll want to have the billing information so you can submit an invoice or submit your travel expenses or get expense reimbursement, whatever it might be. And if you're not already using a speaker engagement planning checklist, try this one out for your next gig, and I think it'll be helpful to you. So the second handout is the speaker's event checklist. And you'll use that one. You get the gig, and now there's a series of things you need to do before that event happens. You need to follow up on different things with the organizer. There's some things you should be doing when you're on site on the day of the event. And then there are a number of things you would be doing after the event as follow-up. So these checklists are checklists that I've personally developed. So feel free to use them. You can modify them, personalize them however you want, make it your own. But I do feel that using a checklist like this really helps you to come across as a professional. And clients will remember you. If you come across as being organized and you're so easy to work with, that's when you're going to get those referrals. That's when you get future gigs with potentially the same client.
Bobby, we have a couple of questions that I'd like to get in before we run out of time.
Okay.
Kathy Smith is actually asking, would you suggest the possibility of having a podcast in order to actually build a following of people that might be looking for an in-person speaker? And Jimmy Dent, kind of along those same lines, is wondering if you would recommend a website that would show something about your speaking topics, your experience, your fees, scale, that type of thing.
The answer to both questions is yes, absolutely. In fact, I don't think you can be a successful professional speaker without an easy to use informative website. And there are a number of places where you can, get information online about developing a website. And Kathy, yes, one of the expectations usually for a professional speaker is to have a social media presence. So if you're doing podcasts or whatever it might be, maybe you're doing events on Facebook, the seminar events, whatever it might be, all of those things, they always help you get exposure, and that's what you need. And Jimmy, for the website, in order for you to be easy to deal with, I mean, you don't want to have to be exchanging emails and trying to send a huge, video reel, a clip, a big MP4 file or something like that. You want that stuff available on your website. And if you don't have a great website, then chances are you won't get as many bookings as someone who does have that great website. Does that make sense? Okay. Well, we are about out of time, so let me just wrap up for tonight. We spoke about finding speaking opportunities. We talked about, developing a presenter proposal. We talked about strategies for negotiating fees, and then I gave you a couple of checklists that you can use for your speaking engagements. But remember, overall, it is so important to be a professional. And remember, it's who you know, and more importantly, who knows you. That's what's going to get you the gigs. And when you're a brand new speaker, it's up to you to get out there and find those opportunities, create the opportunities. And once you've got a little experience, that's when referrals will come to you and they'll be your bread and butter. Okay, so that completes the webinar, but let me just wrap up by inviting you to attend our next Showtime Power Hour workshop. Our presenter will be Trish Blackwelder, and it's on Monday, July 18th, and she'll be talking about why watch the World Championships of Public Speaking. And I also invite you to join us at our regular Showtime meetings. We meet Tuesday, or the second and fourth Monday nights from 6:30 to 8:00 p.m. We are 100% online, and we're rather unique because each of our formal speakers gets 2 oral evaluations. And we've also created an additional functionary role that we call the virtual evaluator that will give you feedback about your presence in the virtual environment. So again, if you missed the handouts, they're available on Showtime's website. And the video of tonight's workshop session will be available by Friday on Showtime's YouTube channel. I'll send out an email tomorrow to attendees so that you'll have the information where you can find it. And again, finally, I just want to thank you all so much for being here tonight. I love speaking about the business of speaking, and I hope we see you at our next workshop or our next club meeting. So go ahead and stop the recording.